Welcome to New York Comic Con's Snowpiercer Season 2 panel. I am thrilled to have the amazing Debbie Diggs, Rowan Blanchard, Sean Bean, Graeme Manson, the man behind this incredible train, and Jennifer Connelly to talk about all the secrets and surprises coming up in Season 2 and to digest all the trauma of Season 1. When we last left the train, things were in a pretty perilous state. David's character Leighton had taken over in a revolution, and Jennifer was wandering around in the snow, which, as we know, is a really bad idea. And I wanted to talk to you all about that and about the arrival of two thought-provoking and maybe terrifying characters played by Rowan and Sean. And I'd like to start, I guess, with you, Graeme. When we left the train, we were in a state of revolution. And now we arrive at a collision between two different cultures, literally, and a really kind of sort of tabula rasa for this mythology, for this new world. When you were thinking about this season, how far ahead into Season 1 did you know where you were going to take things?
I think with the writers in the room, pretty early on, we had decided that the end of Season 1 would be the appearance of a second train, and that gave us the opportunity to build up the myth of Wilford. You know, someone that played so heavily in his absence through Season 1 on both Melanie and David's characters, so we knew pretty early, and that it was going to be a really exciting jump-off point. To leave Melanie out there in the snow, like you said, and introduce us to the horrifying two new characters, as you put it.
Well, I'd like to talk about the first character you mentioned, which is Mr. Wilford first. The great mystery of Season 1 was sort of a Wizard of Oz, a dystopian Wizard of Oz. The man behind the curtain turned out to be Jennifer's character, Melanie. And that was an incredibly interesting journey. Did you have somebody like Sean in mind? You knew you were going to give him a physical presence earlier. So what makes Sean, I should say Sean Bean always dies horrible deaths. So we're hoping that that doesn't happen this time. But when you were coming together, thinking about the character of Mr. Wilford, why Sean, and what was it about him that appealed to you?
No, it's a really difficult thing, because it's great to introduce, build up a character like that, and you kind of would love to see them right at the end of Season 1, but it's a very hard thing to do, to cast someone, of Sean's stature, for one little bit at the end when you don't know yet whether you have a Season 2. So you end up trying to, fudge your way through, and for a long time we had little snippet of Mr. Wilford's voice that, played through the episodes. And when we finally were able to cast him before we premiered Season 1, we were able to put Sean's voice into Season 1. So it felt like we knew what we were doing the whole time.
And Sean, what appealed to you about this particular character, and you entering yet another dystopian hellscape as an actor?
I just thought the character was just so attractive to me, because he was so kind of rich and textured and fun to be with, a fun guy to be with, very smart, had a lot of anger and bitterness towards Melanie. Felt very betrayed, but aspects of his character that. He's not very, he's quite charming, but he's not a very nice man if you have to live with him or be in his presence. He's very, he's a bit of a psychopath. I guess they're quite charming. They seem very sincere, but they'll backstabbers. He's that kind of character, and he's not afraid of kind of displaying his cruelty, because he thinks that's clever and and it's for the greater good for the new social order on the train.
And Rowan, you have a a sort of special relationship with our resident baddie, and this is a big departure for you. Your first scenes, really intense scenes, and you're pretty tough doing this. What appealed to you about signing on board the Hell Express?
I guess I was just interested how Alex is kind of approaching like coming onto this train as like work for her, and she comes from such a different part of like experience, and there's like, I guess what I was attracted to just joining everybody along was like, I don't know, I guess the character of Alexandra, like, it fascinated me that she has always been like an adult her whole life, but there's still this like need because of so much stuff that wasn't like nurtured around her during her youth for her mom, and like this calling for her mom, even though she like has a lot of resentment towards her as well. And so yeah, I mean the first scenes were pretty intense, but I think that Alex also wanted to be taken very seriously. Like the second she encountered these other people who have kind of had a nicer life than her.
So now I want to just turn to the yin and yang of our train, David and Jennifer. What's fascinating, it's almost like a marriage between Leighton and Melanie, this sort of process of discovering each other. And Jennifer, I think just those scenes, those intense scenes that people will see of you at the beginning of this season, it's really physical labor that you're doing, and you're in this heavy suit, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it is quite different from the character that we meet at the beginning of season 1, who is sort of this very frosty, very put together in her hostess outfit kind of character. That must have been a lot of fun to do, to kind of bust out of the train and do a lot of real action work.
It was. I love a good action sequence. So that was a lot of fun. I was pretty excited when I read those pages and those episodes. And yeah, it's kind of, I guess I feel like, it was a facade. She was sort of portraying a character. It was a device that she was using to kind of help things move forward. The character of Melanie as, hospitality. And I think that she's dropped that facade, and she's kind of returned to herself, and she's on a mission, she has a call to action. So we meet her in season 2, and she's sort of her true self, doing what she knows how to do best,
And David, it's fascinating to watch you guys kind of switch positions in this universe. When we meet Leighton, he is a man of high sort of moral character, and it seems that, preserving life and fighting for the tail is super important to him at the beginning of season 1. By the beginning of season 2, you've made some pretty terrible choices to lead. You've made the kind of decisions that we now know Melanie was making for the preservation of mankind. When we meet Melanie, we think she's maybe just a terrible, cold person who does awful things. And now we realize what's motivating her, what the train engine of her moral decision making is. And now you're on that. You're the engineer in a sense.
Yeah, it's I think Leighton's discovery over the course of the first season was about that every decision for like the person in charge of this train is essentially a life or death decision for the remainder of the universe, right? So they think it's a lot to deal with, and the choices he has to make are so difficult. And so I think in the early parts of season 2, like Leighton comes to a much better understanding of the kinds of choices Melanie had to make. And also there's a different kind of respect for her, because he now knows that she's also kind of the architect of this thing in some way, or the builder. So she's actually the only person who can hold this thing together.
Well, what's great about your character is he's very pragmatic by the end of season. He starts to see, you know, he's not still running around seeking vengeance for Josie's death, or, you know, he very quickly accepts that he's just, the poor Folgers are just out there freezing to death, you know.
Yeah.
He railed them. And Jennifer has that great scene with you where she's like, well, you know, this is what it is, and now it's your job.
Right.
I wanted to ask all of you about the timeliness of everything in this show. And I'll start with you, David, but it touches on class conflict. It touches on resource depletion. It touches on corruption and power. It's this weird kind of funhouse mirror into a lot of what we as a society are wrestling with right now. I wonder how evident that was to you as actors from the beginning, or if that was sort of a process of discovering the resonance as you went through it.
It was definitely one of the things that attracted me to the project, was the potential for that. And I think what the show's ended up revealing itself to be is a piece that's about a society that is constantly reinventing itself. The people have to constantly reassess how they govern themselves based on necessity, based on actual survival, and reinvent that over and over again. And the things it brings to light are, you know, what is this idea of democracy? How does that function during crisis? Like, how much stock do you want to put in your leaders? In what ways are underground economies valuable for for different kinds of systems? There's a whole bunch of like systems analysis going on, which is not really what you think of so much in your sci-fi, but it's in there, and I find that stuff really fascinating, and I think useful just to get to watch people grappling with that in a real human way, because I think it, particularly right now, we're sort of like, we're quarantined, there's an election coming up, but most of us are like segmented into little tiny pockets, and you begin to feel like everything is out of your control. And I think, and that things are just going to happen to you. And I think one of the things that Snowpiercer brings to light is sort of what is dangerous about a society that just allows things to happen to them. The ramifications that you see on the train when people aren't active participants in their own governing are really dire. And so I think that's one of the more instructive things about the show.
Rowan, what do you think about the timeliness of the show?
I guess for me, something that attracted me about the whole project in the first place is just that it, I don't know, I guess I'm just really into these ideas of like working class organizing and like all these things that sort of happen on the show that get contextualized obviously in like the sci-fi world, but just like the way that all of us on the show belong to different kind of groups of people, and like obviously different class systems and have different power dynamics like around that. Obviously that's the way that the world works too. But I guess it's just, it's sort of nice to interact with this world and how like all of these things, obviously as we're saying them, like we know how they apply to America or the world or November or etc. But it's fun to play them in like a make-believe world like that, and kind of get to push the limits of like the governors on the show or the leaders on the show in maybe ways that we don't.
In some ways, Jennifer, you're the ultimate manager of the 1% when this starts. And Leighton is a community organizer, like the ultimate community organizer. Melanie is really invested in keeping the train running, in management of society, however imperfect it is, however oppressive it is, because it's all she has. She's created the world and she's going to keep it running, even though it leads her to do really brutal things. And it's two different kinds of perspectives on how to deal with a problematic society. One is, I guess, and your characters, really her management set. She's a coastal elite, she's a manager, and it's only later that we see that she's really got a lot of pain and a lot of emotion behind it. How different are you in terms of how do you see yourself more like a Leighton in real life? Do you understand? Was it hard to get into Melanie's head? Because it takes a long time to understand her.
Well, she's not a coastal elite. They have a scene where she talks about the fact that she grew up on
A farm, that's true.
And that she actually isn't what people assume that she is. And she winds up, and she has another scene where she says, you know, I didn't create the system, I inherited it. And actually, while it appears, because she's running hospitality, that, you know, sort of the 1% is, you know, that's sort of the crew that she's looking out for the most. Really, it's kind of in the service of all of humanity.
Right.
But that said, yes, she isn't an anarchist, and she hasn't broken down the system. She's used the system that was in place.
She's succeeded in that system,
which is a system of maintaining status. She maintains the status quo, and she tries to keep everything going exactly the way it has been going. This sort of capitalist society, and then Leighton appears, and he's kind of on the other side of things. And I think that actually what you see in her is she makes a change. She says, well, my way, it seems like my way isn't working, because the collateral damage is this suffering. Collateral damage to this method that I've been using is all of this pain that's, you know, and she can't deny it anymore. And so she abdicates, and she turns it over to Leighton to see if another kind of democracy can work. A sort of a more egalitarian vision of society. So I think she has a huge transformation in the course, and I think that it reveals kind of the ideals that she actually believes in, that she had given up on, to tell you the truth. And you see in season 2, for example, there's an argument between her and Wilford. I won't give too much away, but she's having an argument with him. He is fighting for order, and she is fighting for science, which also feels really timely, and in a way that I hadn't thought of when we were filming it. So I think that actually the person that she becomes at the end is kind of reflects more her own beliefs, if that makes sense.
What's fascinating, Graeme, about this character, which is just a remarkable part to get to play, is when you create a heavy, it's very, you know, she seems to be the antagonist, but she's not. And she's given an opportunity, which I think a lot of us would like to think in real life, when people have power, that they would willingly surrender that power or allow for a different system to come into place. I mean, there are other options. You could pack a court or whatever, but she doesn't do that. She actually decides to willingly let go. Graeme, talk a little bit about the evolution of those characters, particularly those two principal characters, and how clearly you understood at the outset this, and I know you can't reveal too much, but clearly there's a great story between Rowan and Jennifer, as well as Sean, but about evolving Melanie from what might have looked like a stock ice queen, what was never intended to be that.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on one of the things, which was when you alluded to the fact that Melanie and Leighton trade places at a certain point in the season, and you know that's a passing of the crown, and it's a part of Leighton's step up, and it's part of Melanie's evolution too, to take this step back. And then, you know, story-wise, it's just interesting. You know, we're sort of talking about how sci-fi rubs up against the zeitgeist all the time, and we try and write towards that. And this season 2 really, you know, Leighton is now given the chance, you know, in the hard work of creating a democracy and policy making and all these things that, you know, are the groundwork. And then Wilford's train arrives on the horizon, and season 2 really is this very timely examination of authoritarianism against or coming up against a fledgling democracy and the difficulties of that. And it finds Melanie and Leighton on the same foot, which is a nice change in their relationship. It's the next chapter of their relationship. So season 2, offers a lot more with this tremendous complication of both Wilford, the terrible nemesis, and then Rowan's amazing character, which is, there's a really great story coming up, which is how she's been held in sway by Wilford and how her perception has been shaped towards her mother. But when she sees her mother in action and begins to understand who her mother is, it begins a very, very interesting season 2 journey for her.
Sean, talk about what drives Mr. Wilford a little bit. He must be an awfully fun character to play. You get to soak in a bathtub. You get to kind of chew the velvet and the, upholstery of a very plush car.
He's very well ensconced in his quarters, and he enjoys this game playing. He's always got a plan B or a plan C. He knows kind of all the moves, and he relishes this in a strange way with Melanie and Leighton. And anybody that crosses his path, but in particular those two. And he has an absolute, real seething bitterness towards Melanie because of what she did and how she betrayed him. Oh, so he thinks. And I guess that's what drives it on and drives him on. He wants utter control, and he believes totally in an authoritarian rule. And order. That's just the way he is, and that's what he believes in, and that's what's brought him so far in the world. He's incredibly intelligent, and he's incredibly inventive. But at the same time, he, like I said, he is charming, and he is fun to be with. But the things, the lengths he will go to in order to get what he wants are quite incredible and quite funny sometimes. Yeah, I quite enjoy playing him because of that, because of the lengths he goes to. He's very imaginative.
And on that note, I'm going to turn to some fan questions. Will we see characters from Big Alice make an appearance besides Mr. Wilford and Melanie's daughter? Graeme, that seems like a good question for you.
Yeah, it's a smaller train back there, but it's a whole other world. So that was one of the great joys of season 2, is to work with our art department and design another train and another society. So it's only 40 cars long, but they've got a crew of, what is it, 200? Is that what we figured? Rowan, how many people in your train?
200 sounds right. Yes.
Pop quiz. Can I also, just as an actor, am really jealous of the Big Alice crew. In some ways, they're like so wild. those characters are like, it's just it is a different world. And so when we'd been living in Snowpiercer for a year, and then you come up against Big Alice, it feels like an alternate dimension, kind of like the way they dress is slightly different, and the way it was kind of like you go to a new school and like there's all the cool kids and you're like, oh man, oh no, I'll never be cool like them.
I imagine, Graeme, part of the fun of having Big Alice is, and one of the delights of the first season was just getting to create these worlds within worlds. These different cars that are filled with fruit trees or nightclubs or whatever. So I imagine you probably have some tricks up your sleeve, because I would imagine Mr. Wilford has a pretty good design sensibility.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things we love to do on the show, is You know, and that really comes from the energy of director Bong's movie, how you could open a door and constantly find some amazing sets. So we love to do that every year, and Wilford's Train really gave us that opportunity. But it is you know, the old Big Alice is a prototype, so it's not all first class back there. It's they have a different society. Wilford has created something else.
I have a feeling it's not going to be all, you know, sponge baths and waterfalls on Big Alice.
Although there are some sponge baths.
Lot of baths. A lot of washing.
A lot of washing up. The tail could have used that.
Yeah, it's an offensive amount of baths.
The polar opposite, isn't it?
Another fan question to all of you: if you were on Snowpiercer or Big Alice, what would be something you would miss about the real world, or the world you left behind? What would you miss most?
My kids always make fun of me because, like, the catchphrase is, I always say, let's go outside, get some fresh air, and move around a little. It's like, they always make fun of me for saying that. It's like, I just want to go for a walk, or I want to go for a bike ride, or I want to go for a hike. And, you know, I just love being outside and doing stuff and moving about. So for me, I think I would miss that. It's swimming in the ocean. Just, you know, our planet's amazing. The mountains, the ocean, the forests, you know. So yeah, that's probably more than one thing.
What 3 things would you want to bring on the Snowpiercer with you? You can only bring 3, and, you know, obviously yourself.
Can we lump, like, family and friends into one thing? Can that be one, or is that too much? Do I have to pick, like, individual people? Because that's awful. That's like,
that would be terrible. That would be another thing. That would be like Sophie's Choice, and we don't want to make another bad train moment.
Family and friends, and then, like, music collection.
That's a good one.
Book collection.
That's good. Those are good calls. Sean, what would you bring?
But what else could it, yeah, music, books, banana milkshakes. I'd like to have a supply of them.
I have a feeling Mr. Wilford has all of that.
Well, I buy it. I find it difficult to think.
One thing he doesn't need is family and friends. Well, he does have family with him, as we know. But, Rowan, is there anything special you would bring on a constantly journeying train?
I would definitely bring a music collection. I would gather up some family and friends, and then on Big Alice, we don't have a lot of the same food that Snowpiercer has, so I would bring a ton of food.
It seemed like food was really important to Big Alice when you go back on your little trip to Gristades.
Yeah, I mean, I've had like eggs or fruit in years.
You order poultry and morphine. Anyway, so what better thing to get from D'Agostino's? And David,
I'll bring the Broken Earth trilogy, N.K. Jemisin's last trilogy, which they have compiled into one book now, so that you can do that. So that's one thing. I'll bring the Parliament album, Clones of Dr. Funkenstein, and I will bring I'll bring like a really good bottle of gin to sip very slowly until it's gone.
See, that is the way it's done, panel. This is like apocalyptic train discs that we just started a new show instead of Desert Island. I hope people know what Desert Island discs are. If they don't, Sean will tell you. Well, this brings us to the sad part. You guys are going to be going on your train, but they're kicking me off to die of exposure and be shattered into a million pieces by a hammer. But I did want to tee up something great, which is that Graeme has an announcement. When will the train be coming in to the station for all the fans out there again for season 2?
Yes, JD, I do have something to announce. Glad to say everybody can look forward to season 2 of Snowpiercer, premiering Monday, January 25th at 9 p.m. on TNT. We're looking forward to it.
Hey.
Excellent. And
I just learned that too. That's awesome.
big surprise for all of you. And to get you guys all excited, we'll give you a little teaser right now. So let's see what's going on the train.
This is your conductor speaking. We're only moments away from righting the reprehensible wrong that's befallen our great, eternal engine.
Every revolution begins as a seed. It festers and spreads like wildfire until the gates are kicked down and the castle is stormed.
Let us remember this moment, this opportunity to set the world straight again. One might think
This is where the revolution ends.
when really
It's only just begun.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining me. This has been a real honor.
Thanks,
I think
JD.
It's not only fun,
Yeah.
but it is hugely important and timely and really exciting. And you're a masterclass in how to act really, really well on the Metroliner or the Estella. So check it out.